Somewhere Better by I_am_Ellie on AO3. Episode 66, Chapter 16, Stiff. They were still on call, even after Muscular had been securely chained and crated off to a holding cell. After all, someone had to do the cleanup, look for any bodies or victims the paramedics had missed, and make sure the damaged dock and ring were secure. Hizashi and Shouta had kicked up a fuss, making sure to yell every expense in the book, even when their throats began to grow hoarse. But they were the lowest ranking heroes on site, and the only pros who hadn't been called away from patrol. So, they did their jobs. They secured the area, helped the remaining children off the ship who had somehow been missed, and when they found bodies in the water, Hizashi jumped down to pull them out so Shouta could cover them in tarps. It was grunt work, and by the time they were done, they were covered in blood, grime, and salty ocean water that made their clothes lay stiff. However, at the very least, it was a distraction until they were able to meet Izuku at the hospital. In total, the whole process took them about an hour and a half, because even after all that, they had to give statements to placated, frantic police officers and the reporters who were practically frowning at the mouths to get all the juicy details straight from the pros. Shouta just wanted to go home. Hizashi drove them both to the nearest emergency room, and they climbed out of the car. There was a crowd of even more reporters and police officers gathered outside the doors of the hospital. Around the side of the building, there was a long line of ambulances and a crowd of doctors trying to get patients to and fro. Shouta didn't see Izuku on any of the stretchers or gurneys, so he assumed he was already in the building. Good. They pushed through the crowd of people so they could make it to the front entrance, offering hasty apologies whenever they knocked someone over. There was a hurried-looking doctor in blue scrubs standing before the side doors, bearing entrance, looking like she wanted to cry. Hizashi stepped towards the petite woman. Our kid was in the accident. He has green hair and green eyes too, lots of freckles, really, really short. Kinda chubby. Is he there? His name is Izuku. Izuku Midoriya. The woman gave a worried sigh, running a hand through her short hair. Sir, she began. I'm not on call in the emergency room at the time. I don't know anyone who's gone in or out. I'm sorry about your son. And if you want, you could go inside and give a description to a nurse, and she can try and find him for you. But you won't be able to go inside. We can find him ourselves if you just let us. I can't do that, sir. Hospital protocol dictate. We were pros on the scene. Shouta snaps, stepping forward. Not one of these vultures trying to sneak in for a cheap story. He gestured at the crowd of reporters behind them. He shook his hands out, irritation building. Now, our boy's in there. Move before I make you. She glared up at him through glassy eyes. Sir, hospital protocol. Ma'am, he is 6 years old. Look, miss. Dr. Sato, she snapped. Dr. Sato. Hizashi hastily corrected himself. Look, he's only a child. He's so sensitive, and if he wakes up by himself, he'll be so scared. He's just a baby. He could be dying in there. I understand that, sir, and I am sorry, Dr. Sato said carefully. But I can't do anything if it's against hospital protocol. If you have any pictures of the boy, I could show them to a nurse, and they can try and find him. But you can't go in the building until then. You'll just be in the way. Hizashi took out his phone, turning the cracked screen towards the woman, and showing a picture of Izuku taken recently. It showed Izuku playing with the cats on the sofa, Takara curled up happily on his chest, and little Akio standing on his knees. The doctor took the phone and stepped into the building. Waving over a tall man in red scrubs, she showed him a photo of the boy, and they exchanged a few words before the man nodded, running out of sight. Dr. Sato stepped back outside. We'll find your boy, one way or another. You'll just have to be patient until then. There are some benches over there, and we'll come and get you once we know where he is. I'm sorry you couldn't use one of our waiting rooms, but they're all full, so... No, that's fine. Hizashi shook the woman's hand. Thank you. She nodded, and they walked towards the bench, sitting in to wait. The first time Shouta had been inside a hospital, his father had come home from a scuffle and had bled all over the front mat. Shouta could remember the incident like it was yesterday, even though he'd only been 4. Waking up to a crash from the living room and rushing in to find his father in a heap on the floor, bleeding profusely from a litany of small cuts littering his face, neck, and chest. His mother had been at work. Shouta hadn't seen her in a while, since she'd been covering both the night shift and the day shift at 2 different jobs to make ends meet, and his sister had decided to stay the night at a friend's house. Shouta hadn't been able to talk much at 4, only knowing basic phrases, and even then, he rarely used them. But he learned from Inko that if someone was hurt, or if someone made Shouta scared, he should call the emergency number. So, Shouta had. He had called them. Just as the operator picked up, his father began to groan and writhe on the floor, sensing that Shouta screamed, and screamed, and screamed. He screamed until his voice became hoarse and his throat became raw. He screamed until all he could hear was the operator's frantic voice and his father demanding that he shut up. Several police officers, ambulance, and fire trucks had appeared outside of his apartment. They found Shouta, curled up with his back against the couch, phone pressed against his ear as he trembled. He trembled and screamed even as his voice broke and wavered dangerously. They found his father sitting in a pool of his own blood on the floor, groaning and yelling at Shouta, who only screamed louder. The paramedics had located Shota's father into an ambulance, and a firefighter had helped Shouta remember how to breathe. When he had stopped screaming, he started sobbing, pulling at his short, shaggy hair as the firefighter grabbed his wrist, trying to pull his hand away from his head. The firefighter had hushed him and rocked him, walking him back and forth in the apartment until his crying had died down, and he laid still and exhausted and a bit afraid in the firefighter's arms. They have driven him to the hospital in a fire truck, stopping first to buy Shouta a chocolate ice cream cone with a lot of syrup and rainbow sprinkles. Shouta had eaten it while he sat in his father's recovery room, staring at him with all his stitches and bandages and IV lines. Inko had appeared at the hospital first, before even their mother, and had held him in his lap while they waited for their father to wake up. Shouta had gotten scolded by his mother, later, for getting chocolate sauce all over the front of his shirt and smearing it over his face. Shouta hadn't cared much. The ice cream had soothed his raw throat. He hadn't minded much that half of it had ended up on his clothes. Shouta felt sort of like he had then at that moment. Tired, achy. His head hurt, and his throat felt raw. He almost wished for another chocolate ice cream cone. Chocolate was his favorite, even if sometimes it made him nauseous. He felt like he should be screaming. Hizashi was holding his hand, and even though they were both cold and clammy from dry sweat and ocean spray, Shota's skin was burning, the salt rubbing the inside of his elbows and knees and neck, intensifying the feeling. For a moment, he wanted to tear away from the grip, but he didn't. Instead, he closed his eyes and slouched down on the bench. His knee was aching. He should probably put a brace on. That was the smart thing to do. The logical thing. But it was back at the apartment, and they couldn't just leave. They had been sitting there half an hour, stiffed back and quiet, when a nurse finally approached. Izuku Midoriya? The man asked, and Shouta and Hizashi quickly stood up, guiding them into the hospital past all the reporters, talking all the while. I understand you both were pros on the scene. Were either of you injured or in the water? Well, Shouta, no. Shouta stated, quickening his pace, despite the stabbing pain in his knee. Where is he? He still hasn't woken up yet. The nurse warned him, outside a small, put-to-the-side room. His core temperature was very low, but we managed to get it back up to an acceptable level after a while. He stopped breathing once on the way here, and had to be resuscitated by the EMTs. He has several cracked ribs from the CPR, and a few small cuts and scrapes, and he'll probably be a little bit sick once he wakes up because of the cold water, but... And he hasn't woken up? Not once? Hizashi demanded. The nurse shook his head regretfully. I'm afraid not. we don't know if he has any neurological damage until then. For now, we have him on warm IV fluids and some light painkillers to help ease any discomfort from the broken ribs. I'm sorry, we don't have any better news. And can we see him? Hizashi asked, already leaning towards the door a bit, like he would push his way in if he had to. Shouta shared the sentiment. Yes, for now, you can see him, the nurse said, and for a moment, a small smile graced his face. Your boy's a fighter. Everything will work out the way it's supposed to in the end, and we'll do whatever we can to help him along the way. His doctor might show up sometime soon to ask a few questions about his health, anything we might need to know, allergies, and the like. Shouta and Hizashi nodded, and the nurse stepped to the side, leaving a clear path towards the door. Shouta walked in through first, Hizashi on his heel, and Shouta felt a pang of hurt at the sight of the small, smothered body on the hospital bed. He took a deep breath. It wasn't as if he hadn't seen the situation before. He sat with Izuku through a hospital visit before, and at the very least, this time, they knew Izuku had a good chance of survival. They hadn't been given that chance before, when the boy's appendix had erupted. There hadn't been a risk of brain damage then, his brain reminded him. More is at stake. He banished that thought, pushed them away into a little box. Shouta wasn't a superstitious man, not in the slightest, but he wasn't going to risk any negative thoughts coming true. Hizashi was crying. He hadn't been there, back when Izuku was sick. Hadn't been laying up in his own bed thanks to the mission gone wrong. His face was drawn and pale, and his green eyes were rimmed with red as fat tears spilled down his cheeks. His hair was starting to fall out of its gel, thanks to a combination of salt water and sweat, and it drooped from his head sadly, like a wilting flower. There was a cut on his cheek as well as a bruise just by his eye. He knew where the bruise had come from. That much was obvious. But he couldn't seem to remember whether the small cut came from the villain fight, or if it were from a nick when shaving it that morning. He almost shook himself. Focus. Sometimes he fell out of his head. Sometimes it was better to focus on the little things rather than what was right in front of him. The little boy. Izuku. Your little boy. Focus. Hizashi. Your hair's messed up, Shouta noted. His voice was a rasp now that he wasn't choking on salt water or yelling. Hizashi nodded absently, still staring at the tiny body in the tiny bed. If Shouta was honest, he couldn't rightfully judge him. The kid looked half dead. Shouta grabbed Hizashi by the sleeve of his leather jacket and led him to the two chairs, situated right by Izuku's bed. He adjusted one of the chairs and shoved Hizashi down to sit on the floor, picking a strand of gelled slick hair and trying to get it to lie down flat. Hizashi kept staring at Izuku. Shouta thought he might have been too afraid to do anything else. That was okay. If Hizashi was checked out, he couldn't be there. Shouta could be. He could be. I could use a distraction. He separated strands of hair until it was parted to the side, then focused on trying to get them to stop sticking together. Why on earth Hizashi used so much gel was beyond him. After the strands were more separated, it was only a matter of getting rid of any tangles the wind and salt water had left behind. When he was done, his hands felt twitchy, and he leaned back in his chair, tapping a melody on his knee. Hizashi stayed on the floor, his back leaning against Shota's leg, head tilted up, eyes still on Izuku. Shouta thought he might be in shock. He wasn't sure how to deal with someone in shock. He did know. It was one of the things they learned at UA. But this was Hizashi in shock, and Shouta didn't know what to do with that. He didn't want to look at Izuku, so he stared at the wall instead, like it would give him the answers. Walls were boring. Boring was much better than sad. Shouta preferred it, at least. I'm cutting it there. My heart aches. My heart aches for Izuku. And Hizashi and Shouta and just all of that. I'm sorry if you hear the kids in the background. It's the outro. I'm not going to worry about, not recording while they're screaming or anything like that. Oh my god, my heart aches. Because, that's Izuku. Fuck. I really hope he's okay. I mean, these are way better odds than when his appendage broke. But oh god. I'm in shambles. I'm in shambles. I think you guys are in shambles too. I'm in shambles. Okay, this is heartbreaking. This is heartbreaking. We're in chapter 15 too, so we're like, no, 16, not 15, my bad. We're in chapter 16. I was reading the wrong one. We're in chapter 16, and we have 5 more chapters to go. I'm scared. Well, you guys have 10 more videos to go because I separate these episodes by half now, since it's no longer 40, because it used to be 15 minutes each, or 30, not even 30 minutes each, but like 20, 25 minutes each, and it started going to 30 minutes each to 40 minutes each. I think there was one that was 50, but that's why I started to split them up, and it makes it an easier load on me as well when I'm sitting down recording. Like, I hope you guys know, to give you so many videos a day, yeah, that takes a lot of, so you might think it just takes me 15 minutes to record. No, it takes me double, and that's on a good day. I mean, a good day would be a little less than double. What's it called? An average day, I guess, would be a double, and then a bad day where like my lisp is like acting up, for some reason I'm not reading properly, or you know, stuff like that. It goes from double to like triple. I think there was once where it took me a good 40 minutes to record a 15-minute episode. That shit was annoying. Annoying as fuck. It was like 40-50 minutes, and I was like, fuck this shit. But no, this one took me relatively quick. This one was faster, but back onto the topic at hand, Izuku. I am heartbroken. I really hope that nothing bad happens, but yeah, we'll see what happens with Izuku and what his condition is in the next video. As always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.